I've driven past mile 17 more times than I can remember. It's just a stretch of highway, no gas station, no houses, no businesses, just trees on both sides of the road and a green mile marker standing beside the shoulder. Mile 17. For years, I never thought anything of it. Then one night, something happened there that made me afraid to drive that highway again. And even now, I still don't know if what I saw that night was a person or something that only looked like one. The highway was about an hour and a half from my house. I used it regularly because it was the fastest way home after my late shifts. Usually I would get off work around 11:00 at night, stop for something to eat, and start the drive home. It was a boring drive. That was actually what I liked about it. After midnight there was almost no traffic. The road stretched straight through a heavily wooded area, and most nights I could drive for miles without seeing another car. Locals had a few stories about that stretch of highway, nothing I ever took seriously. Some people claimed drivers would see a car following them after mile 17. Others said their GPS would suddenly stop working. A friend of mine once told me he'd seen someone standing beside the road there at around 2 in the morning. He said the person was wearing a dark jacket and had their back turned toward the highway. When he looked in his rearview mirror, the person was gone. I laughed when he told me. I told him he was probably tired. That's what I thought all the stories were, people driving late at night, getting tired, seeing something in the darkness, turning it into a story afterward. Then one Thursday night I became part of one. I left work a little after 11:30. It had been raining earlier that evening, but by the time I reached the highway, the rain had stopped. The pavement was still wet. Every streetlight reflected across the road like a long yellow streak. I turned onto the highway and settled into the drive. There were only a few cars around me. After about 20 minutes, I was completely alone. No headlights ahead, no headlights behind me, just my headlights cutting through the darkness. I remember checking the clock. 12:47 a.m. I had another 40 minutes before I reached home. That's when I saw the sign. Mile 16, I didn't think anything of it. I kept driving. A few minutes later, I saw mile 17. The green sign appeared on the right side of the road. Mile 17. As I passed it, something strange happened. My headlights flickered just once. The dashboard went dark for maybe half a second, then everything came back. The radio stopped playing. The headlights came back on. The dashboard lit up. I looked at my phone mounted beside the steering wheel. It had no signal. That wasn't unusual on this highway, so I didn't think much about it. Then the radio came back, but it wasn't playing the station I'd been listening to. It was just static. I reached over and changed the station. Nothing, another station, static, another, static. I turned it off. That's when I noticed something in my rearview mirror. Headlights. There was a car behind me. It was far enough away that I couldn't make out the make or model, but I could clearly see the headlights. I remember feeling relieved. I wasn't alone anymore. The car followed me for maybe a minute. Then another strange thing happened. The headlights disappeared, not gradually. They were simply gone. I checked the mirror again. Nothing. I looked ahead. Nothing. I slowed down slightly. Maybe the other driver had turned off the highway. There weren't many exits, but it was possible. I continued driving. About 30 seconds later, I saw the headlights again. This time they were much closer. I immediately checked my speed. I was doing about 55. The car was maybe 200 feet behind me. I could see the outline now, dark-colored sedan, no headlights other than the two white beams. I thought maybe the driver had simply sped up, so I sped up too. I went to 60. The car stayed behind me, 65 still behind me, then 70. The distance between us didn't change. That started bothering me. I slowed back down. The car slowed too. I changed lanes. The car changed lanes. I moved back. It moved back. I told myself I was being paranoid. Maybe it was just another driver going home. Then I noticed something. The car didn't have a license plate. At least I couldn't see one. There was a bright white reflection where the plate should have been, but no actual plate number. I reached for my phone. No signal. I thought about calling someone anyway. Before I could, the car behind me disappeared. Again, I looked in the mirror, nothing. The road behind me was completely empty. I started feeling uncomfortable. I told myself I should stop at the next exit and let the car pass if it came back. But there wasn't an exit for several miles, so I kept driving. About 2 minutes later, I saw something standing on the right side of the highway. At first, I thought it was a sign, then I realized it was a person. They were standing just inside the tree line. Completely still, I slowed down. The person was wearing a dark hooded jacket. Their head was lowered, their face wasn't visible. I immediately wondered what they were doing out there. There was no sidewalk, no house nearby, no parked vehicle, nothing, just trees. And this person standing beside the highway after 1 in the morning. As I got closer, I moved slightly toward the center of the road. I didn't want to get too close. The person didn't move, I passed them. For a second, I considered stopping. Maybe they needed help. Maybe their car had broken down somewhere, but something about the way they were standing bothered me. They weren't waving. They weren't looking toward traffic. They were just standing there, facing the road. I kept driving. Then I looked into my rearview mirror. The person was gone. I stared at the mirror for several seconds. There was nowhere they could have gone. I would have seen them walk into the trees, but they weren't there anymore. I started feeling the kind of fear that doesn't come from seeing something terrifying. It comes from realizing you don't understand what you're looking at. I locked the doors. I turned the radio back on, static. I turned it off again. Then my phone suddenly buzzed. I almost jumped. I looked down. One notification. It was from my GPS. The route had disappeared. The screen showed a message, no signal. I wasn't surprised by the lack of signal, but what bothered me was the location. The GPS still showed me exactly where I was. Mile 17. I kept driving. A minute later, my phone buzzed again. This time, the GPS had recalculated. The estimated arrival time had changed from 38 minutes to 11 minutes. I knew that was impossible. I hadn't taken an exit. I hadn't changed roads. I was still on the same highway. I looked at the map. The blue line showing my route had disappeared. Instead, there was just a grey road stretching ahead. I decided to ignore it. I needed to get home. Then I saw headlights again, the same car. This time it was ahead of me, parked on the shoulder, facing the opposite direction. No headlights, no hazard lights, just sitting there. As I approached, I slowed down. I couldn't see anyone inside. The windows were completely dark. I passed it. Then I looked in my rearview mirror. The car was still there. I drove another mile, then another. Nothing happened. Eventually, I started relaxing. Maybe I had just scared myself. Maybe the car had been broken down. Maybe the person beside the road had simply walked away. Maybe the GPS was malfunctioning. There had to be an explanation. Then I crossed the next mile marker, mile 18. My phone suddenly regained signal. The GPS started working again. The radio came back. Everything returned to normal. I laughed quietly to myself. I remember thinking that I had officially let the internet horror stories get into my head. Then I noticed something in my rearview mirror. The car was behind me again. I froze. It was the same dark sedan, same distance, same headlights. I looked at the road ahead, then back at the mirror. The car was there. I accelerated. The car accelerated. I slowed down. It slowed down. Then I noticed something I hadn't seen before. The headlights weren't illuminating the road. They were pointed directly at me, almost like someone was deliberately keeping them aligned with my rearview mirror. I turned off the radio. I turned off the interior lights. I kept both hands on the steering wheel. Then the car behind me disappeared. I waited. Nothing. I checked the mirror again. Nothing. I finally exhaled, and that's when my phone buzzed. I glanced down. There was a new photo in my gallery. I hadn't taken a picture. The photo was completely dark except for a small section of highway. I stared at it. Then I recognized the road. It was the highway I was driving on. And in the center of the image was my car, viewed from behind. I could see my own license plate. I could see the red glow of my taillights. The picture had been taken from another vehicle. I looked at the timestamp. 1:19 a.m. I checked the clock on my dashboard. 1:19 a.m. Someone had taken that photograph. At that exact moment, I immediately pulled onto the shoulder. My heart was pounding. I checked the road behind me. There was nothing, no car. No headlights, no person. I unlocked my phone and tried to figure out where the photo came from. There was no sender, no message. It simply appeared in my gallery. Then I noticed something else. The photo wasn't taken from behind my car. It had been taken from the side. From somewhere just off the road, I zoomed in, and that's when I saw the person standing beside the trees. The same dark hooded figure I'd passed earlier, except this time, they weren't standing beside the road. They were standing much closer. Less than 20 feet from my car, and they were looking directly at me. I looked up from my phone. There was nobody outside. I locked the doors again, started the engine, and drove. I didn't stop until I reached the next town. I didn't tell anyone what happened that night, not even my friend who had told me those stories about mile 17. I knew how it would sound. I also knew there had to be some explanation. Someone could have taken the picture. Maybe my phone had somehow received an old image. Maybe I downloaded something without realizing it. Maybe I had imagined the figure. I kept telling myself that. For several days it worked. Then 3 mornings later I woke up and found another photograph in my phone. This one was taken at 1:20 a.m. 1 minute after the first. It showed the same highway, the same road, the same trees, but there was no car in the picture. No headlights, no traffic, only the empty road and the mile 17 sign. Someone had taken the second picture after I had already driven away, and beneath the photograph was a location tag. I stared at it for several seconds. It wasn't my location. It wasn't even the highway. The location tag simply said mile 17. I didn't know what to do with that information, so I did what most people do when something scares them badly enough. I tried to forget about it. I stopped taking that highway. I used a longer route to work. I avoided driving at night. And for almost 3 weeks nothing else happened, until one Friday morning, when I found something waiting underneath my windshield wiper. It was a photograph printed on ordinary paper, a picture of my car taken from behind, and written across the bottom in black ink were 4 words. "You missed me again." I didn't drive home that night. I sat in my car at the gas station for almost an hour, trying to convince myself that what I'd seen on mile 17 had an ordinary explanation. Maybe the woman had been walking along the road. Maybe she had gotten into another vehicle. Maybe I had imagined the entire thing because I was tired. But there was one problem. I had taken a photograph, and in that photograph she was standing exactly where I had seen her, on the shoulder, facing my car. Wearing the same dark coat, I zoomed in until the image became blurry. There was no mistake. Someone had been standing there. I called my friend Daniel. He was the person who had first told me about mile 17. He answered after the 3rd ring. "Where are you?" I told him. There was a long silence. Then he asked, "Did you stop?" I didn't answer. "Did you stop at mile 17? "Yes." Another silence, this time longer. "Don't go back there." I asked him why. He didn't explain. Instead, he told me something he'd never mentioned before. Years earlier, his older brother had disappeared on that same highway. He had been driving home late at night. His car was found abandoned near mile 17. The driver's door was open. The engine was still running. His phone was sitting on the passenger seat, but he was gone. The police searched the woods for 3 days. They found nothing. Daniel said his brother had mentioned seeing someone on the road a few nights before he disappeared. A woman, always near the same marker, always facing the traffic. I asked Daniel why he had never told me that. He said, "Because I didn't want you looking for her." I stared at the photograph on my phone. "Who is she?" Daniel said he didn't know. Then he told me something that made my stomach tighten. His brother had left one final voicemail. It was only 7 seconds long. The recording had been recovered from his phone. There was no voice, no conversation, just the sound of his car slowing down. Then a woman's voice whispered one sentence, "You're going the wrong way." The call ended. I listened to the recording 3 times. The voice was quiet, almost too quiet, but it sounded exactly like the woman I had heard that night. I didn't sleep. The following afternoon, I drove back toward mile 17. I knew I shouldn't, but I also knew I couldn't let it go. This time I brought a camera, and I didn't stop on the highway. I pulled onto an old service road about half a mile away. From there, I walked through the trees until I reached the back side of the marker. During the day, the place looked completely ordinary. There was a ditch, a line of trees, a broken fence, and an old gravel path disappearing into the woods. I followed it. After about 10 minutes, I found something, an abandoned vehicle. It was almost completely covered by branches. The windshield was shattered. The driver's door hung open. I recognized the model immediately. It was the same model Daniel's brother had driven. I called Daniel. He answered immediately. I told him what I'd found. He went silent, then he said, "Get out of there." I asked him if he was sure. He said that car was recovered years ago. I looked at the vehicle again. Something was wrong. The license plate was missing. But the interior was strangely clean. There was no dust on the steering wheel, no leaves inside. And on the driver's seat was a folded piece of paper. I opened it. There were 3 words written on it, mile 17. Underneath was a date. A date from only 2 weeks earlier. I took a photograph. Then I heard footsteps behind me, slow, heavy, coming from the trees. I turned around, nothing. I waited. Then I heard another step, closer. I started walking back toward the road. The footsteps followed. I didn't run, not yet. I kept looking between the trees. Then I saw someone, a man, standing about 50 yards away. He wasn't wearing the same clothes as the woman. He was tall, dark jacket, baseball cap. His face was hidden by the trees. I shouted, "Hey!" He didn't answer. He simply turned around and walked deeper into the forest. That was when I ran. I reached my car, locked the doors, and drove away without looking back. I didn't tell Daniel about the man, not immediately. Instead, I went home and checked the photograph I had taken of the abandoned vehicle. There was something in the background, something I hadn't noticed while I was there. A second vehicle parked behind the trees, black SUV, and beside it, the woman. She was standing there. Watching me, I zoomed in. This time I could see her face, and I realized something. She wasn't looking at the camera. She was looking past it, toward the abandoned car, toward the driver's seat, as if she was waiting for someone to get out. I sent the photograph to Daniel. He called me less than a minute later. His voice was shaking. "That's not possible." "What? That's my brother's car." "I know." "No." He paused. "Look at the driver." I zoomed in again. There was a person sitting behind the steering wheel. I hadn't noticed them before. The photograph was too dark to make out the face, but there was definitely someone inside. I asked Daniel what we should do. He said, "Call the police." So I did. The police arrived at the location with me the next morning, but the vehicle was gone. There was no abandoned car, no black SUV, no woman, nothing, only the trees. The officer asked me where I had seen it. I showed him the photograph. He looked at it for several seconds, then he asked, "When was this taken?" I gave him the date. He stared at me. "That's strange." "What?" He pointed toward the photograph. "This road was closed 2 weeks ago." I didn't understand. He explained that a section of the highway near mile 17 had been closed because of construction. Nobody should have been driving there. Nobody should have been walking there. And according to the officer, there had been no reports of abandoned vehicles. I asked him about Daniel's brother. He knew the case. He said the disappearance was still officially unsolved. Then he asked me something I wasn't expecting. "Have you been receiving any phone calls?" I said no. He looked relieved. Then he said, "If you do, don't answer." I asked why. He wouldn't tell me. I left for several weeks. Nothing happened. Eventually, I stopped thinking about mile 17. I stopped checking the photograph. I stopped talking to Daniel about it. Then almost 2 months later, I received a message from an unknown number. There was no text, only a photograph. I opened it. It was a picture of my car taken from behind. I was driving down the highway, and in the distance was the mile 17 marker. The timestamp showed 2:13 a.m., but I knew something was wrong. I had never driven that road at 2:13 a.m., not that night. Not any night. I checked the image again. There was one more detail. Someone was standing beside the marker, the woman, and beneath the photograph was a single message. "You passed me again." I blocked the number. I never drove that highway again. Daniel eventually moved away. He refuses to talk about his brother. As for me, I still have the original photograph. I never deleted it. Sometimes I look at it and wonder whether the woman was trying to warn people about something, or whether she was leading them somewhere. Because after everything that happened, there is still one thing I can't explain: the photograph of the abandoned car, the one with the person sitting behind the steering wheel. I had the image professionally examined. The person inside wasn't my imagination. There was a human figure in that driver's seat. But the strange part is this: the photograph was taken in daylight, and according to the timestamp, it was taken at 2:13 in the afternoon. Yet the figure inside the car appears to be looking directly at the camera, and the face is completely black. No features, no reflection, nothing. I've never been able to explain that. Maybe it was a trick of the shadows. Maybe it was someone sitting in the car. Maybe the photograph was altered somehow. I don't know, but I do know one thing. If you're ever driving alone at night and you see a person standing beside a highway marker, don't stop, don't turn around, and whatever you do, don't follow them into the woods. Because sometimes the person standing beside the road isn't waiting for you to help them. They're waiting for you to stop. That was the end of this story. If you've ever experienced something you still can't explain or have a strange story of your own, send it to Tales of the Dark. Your story could become the next nightmare featured on this channel. If you are new here, subscribe to Tales of the Dark, where every story gives you a nightmare.